The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz along with Dan Rylance. For a very long time, most of us I think have been concerned about holding the line on property taxes while at the same time preserving our essential core services, of course, as well as some quality of life services. And with budgets becoming tighter and tighter, that's becoming an even more pressing issue for everyone. Because of that, some rather influential groups are sort of banding together here, known collectively as the Wisconsin Way, the Wisconsin Counties Association, the Wisconsin Education Association Council, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Wisconsin Transportation Builders Association, and Wood Communications Group are hosting a series of public meetings around the state. They began earlier this month. Actually, we're taping this on November 1st now. They began last month in October, and they will continue through part of this month. And they're basically seeking citizen input. Ways that we can hold the line on taxes and still preserve those core services. And joining us here this evening to talk about that is someone most of you know. He's a former city council member and former mayor, currently the Winnebago County executive, Mark Harris. And then to discuss Wisconsin Way with him is Mark O'Connell. Now, Mark is the executive director for the Wisconsin Counties Association. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Cheryl.
much
Thanks,
for
Dan.
being here tonight. Let's talk about Wisconsin Way first of all. Tell us, I mean, I gave a listing here of who makes this up, but how did these groups come to be together?
That's a good question, Cheryl. And really, these groups have been talking among ourselves for quite some time in our various organizations. We look at our state and we see major problems on the horizon. We have an aging workforce, we have an aging population, we have a below average number of people in our state with higher education, and that has a direct correlation to our per capita personal income. We see a growing demand for services with our aging demographics and a shrinking base. That spells trouble for our future. So we've been talking about the demographics and what this will mean for us in the future, and we're looking at our tax structure as being fairly inconsistent, actually quite inconsistent with our new millennium knowledge-based economy. We have a manufacturing-based tax system being applied to increasingly a new millennium knowledge-based economy. That mismatch is going to cause us tremendous problems in the future. Individually, we've been talking about this. We decided to talk about this together. Now, in our state, I think one of the problems we face is we seem to engage in public policy in 2- and 4-year increments. It's not anyone's fault, it's just those are the rules of the game and we have to deliver. We've engaged in something, I think, in recent years that I've called sliver politics, where the win used to be in the middle. We used to see leaders and policymakers try to gravitate and capture that middle ground, which is where most of us in Wisconsin are. We're middle of the road people. We're not Democrat, Republican. We're both many times. But we used to look at that. Now it seems increasingly we have policymakers cater to the extremes and then build toward the middle 1 percentage point at a time. And if the agenda is not delivered in a 2- and 4-year time frame, then the extremes will play gotcha politics. Mm-hmm. And gotcha meaning you're out, we'll find someone else who will cater more to the extreme. So the middle is being increasingly left out. Well, that kind of sliver politics it's precluding us from looking at our state in 10, 20, and 50-year increments. And that's our responsibility as public officials. Mm-hmm. We have an obligation, a duty, to engage in behavior that are going to help people that we're not going to meet and assist generations that we will never meet. That's that's our duty. Mm-hmm. We're not able to do that if we start looking at public policy 2 and 4 years at a time. We've got some big problems in our state. We have one of the highest per capita debt loads in the country. We have a structural deficit. Even the budget was signed earlier this week, or late October, and we're going to have we already have a $900 million deficit that we know about. We need to start thinking more into the future. Well, the realtors, the teachers, the transportation builders, and the counties association have banded together to say, if this is going to work, then we need to engage the public, because there needs to be a public interest, a public desire. The public has great ideas, but they're sort of frozen out of the current process. This is an opportunity for the public to say, I agree with that problem. I see the same kinds of things in my community. I see the same kinds of things in my family. I want my children, my grandchildren to be in this state. I want them to have jobs. I want a higher per capita personal income. I want a better Wisconsin in 10, 20, 50 years. Here are some ideas that I might have, and we're getting a lot of that in our first 6 meetings.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm new to Wisconsin, only lived here 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
At first blush, this seems like a progressive idea that Wisconsin was sort of weaned on.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me if it is progressive, and if so, how is it progressive, what you want to do?
Well, it's incredibly progressive.
Okay.
But when people hear the word progressive, I don't want them to attach any sort of political party to that.
Oh.
It's progressive thinking in that it's futuristic thinking. The needs in our state are great. The quality of life we have is tremendous. Now, what the public will tell us is that they believe we're spending about the right amount of money or could spend more money on various services, and the public will tell us that you're spending it on the right kinds of things. But what the public is also saying to us is this: I like how much you're spending and what you're spending it on, but I just don't have any of it. I don't have enough money. That speaks to our economy, our mismatch in our economy and our tax structure. We have a low per capita personal income. Let me give you an example, Dan. 25 years ago, Minnesota and Wisconsin were about the same in per capita personal income. Now in 2007, we have about an 11% difference. We're 11% lower. In real dollars, what that means is that for every man, woman, and child in the state of Wisconsin, we're making $3,700, $3,800 less than the men, women, and children in Minnesota. Now, if you multiply that up by our population, we're missing in our state $13 billion of income. If you apply a simple 5% income tax to that, we're talking about $600+ million of income tax money per year, plus sales tax money if people spend any of that. Now, what that does is a couple things. With those kinds of dollars in the legislature, we are able to make a big dent in our property tax. We are able to invest in our communities to make them attractive to the smart young wealth makers of tomorrow. We are able to engage in activities which improve our communities, take care of our infrastructure, and infrastructure is another major issue, Dan, and this is why when it's progressive. When we look at the infrastructures of public health, transportation, technology, water, sewer, we've got roughly $60 to $80 billion of infrastructure improvement necessary in the next 10 to 20 years. We have planned not at all for that, but it's coming. Okay. So is this idea progressive?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Okay, now my second blush is a little different than my first blush. You guys are heavy hitters. The sponsors are really major recipients of the present system. You absorb most of the state budget, and I see no one on your group that are individual taxpayers or NGO type people. Mm-hmm. So it appears to me that those eating out of the trough are going to determine what the next feed will be, and that's great, but seems to me that it might be balanced with more ordinary people.
That's exactly why Wisconsin Way is going out into the communities and asking members of the public to come into these meetings to have a conversation. They're being very careful not to steer people to a specific solution.
Okay.
What we want is a calm, educated discussion of both the problem and the opportunities. And we want ordinary people from a variety of backgrounds to share their ideas with us, okay, so that we have some idea of what might prove attractive to people and what won't. What we do know is that doing business the same way as we always had is not a formula for success. As a local county executive, I can tell you that when people call me, now they often are indicating they just can't stand the steady rise of property tax, especially if they're retired, because your property tax goes up and it doesn't necessarily have any relationship to the amount of money you have available to pay that tax. Where other forms of taxes at least have some sort of relationship to income, the property tax does not. And as we get more and more retirees, the property tax is becoming the most regressive of the taxes. And quite frankly, when they poll people, it's the one they resent the most.
Of course.
But I know that I can't operate the county and its services without some source of revenue. So the only way to get this done is to have some sort of conversation, some sort of public input to find out, okay, what is a fair way to operate the system? Because we do want to have good schools, we do want government services, and we do have to fund those. But we have to fund them in some manner that is acceptable to the public. And we also have to do some long-term thinking that will increase our ability to fund things like education. And that's why you've got these, these groups typically are on different sides of the aisle politically, but they're all coming together because they all see the same problem coming down the line. We're going to have a lot of baby boomers that are going to retire without pensions and without much savings. And when they do, the resistance to property taxes is just going to grow.
It's an interesting comment, Dan, and we've heard it before.
Yeah.
That
was one reading of your group.
Oh, sure.
You guys are the heavy hitters.
And these are heavy hitters.
And you should, it's good that you are, as heavy hitters, are going to start this dialogue.
These are the big boys and girls of the Capitol.
Right,
And we
right.
lobby the legislature and the governor and the federal government
Right.
for our causes. That's true. At the same time, however, this group of people, they're not this group of people you wouldn't normally find having dinner together on the Capitol Square. But 1 year, one of them will win at the expense of another. Another year, it'll switch off. We're not advancing as a state in that regard, and that's problematic. All of these groups individually we've talked among ourselves, among our own members, and we've seen trouble on the horizon. Together, however, we don't want to. We want to stop the you win this year and then I'll win next year. Instead, we all need to win. Now. The executive points out the baby boomer issue, and maybe we'll get into it later, but the 2/3 of our 65 plus population have annual household incomes of $35,000 or less. Many of them in the coming years will not have a pension, will not have very little in a 401k of some sort. Now, as a state, we're going to have to make a decision. Are we simply going to say, gee, that's too bad, you should have taken care of yourself? Or are we going to care for those people? Now, 13% of our population today is 65 or older. In the next 20 years, it's going to move to 21%. 1 in 5 of us will be over age 65, and very likely and it's us, and very likely not have much in retirement.
Yeah.
So yet we're relying on them in terms of the property tax. We're going to measure people's wealth by how much property they've accumulated and rely upon that to fund government. That's not going to work in the future. So it's got to change. We didn't get to this problem overnight. We're not going to solve it overnight. This is going to take, that's why we need to engage in 10, 20, 50-year visioning.
And think of this, if part of the problem is a lower per capita income in Wisconsin, and it has to do with a lower education attainment level than, let's say, Minnesota, if you start getting into this trap where the public is unwilling to bear the tax to support the school systems and the university system, then you end up with less people being able to afford a quality education in Wisconsin. You get into this positive feedback or negative feedback loop that the more unwillingness there is to pay taxes, the less income there is in the state, which leads to more unwillingness to pay taxes, which hurts the education system and leads to less income. You basically wind down to be a very unsatisfactory quality of life. And I think you've got to move ahead of that type of problem as early as you can to make a change.
Well, I think this is a wonderful idea, and it's probably a very long time in coming, but what will you, after you've done all these around the state meetings, you will then, what, take that information to our legislators in Madison? Because, and here's where I'm going with that, Mark and Mark.
Yeah.
That seems weird. I've never had this before. But here's why I asked the question, because it's the city, it's the county, it's the school district who are setting some of our tax levies. And, you know, we're paying them, I think, probably the lion's share of our tax bill. And, you know, unless the local governments are involved in this, or unless you're taking your responses to them, I'm not sure how much good it will end up doing in the long run.
Here's what will happen. We will have 12 meetings throughout the state. The 5 have been held. The 6th is tonight, November 1st, in Superior. Of course, Oshkosh is next Tuesday, November 6th. We engage in discussions where people have seeds of ideas, some have full-fledged, flushed out ideas, and relay them. But we're in these meetings throughout the state, we will be seeing streams of consciousness. Certain ideas get repeated in different parts of the state. That will indicate to us that there is an opportunity to discuss or add more meat to the bone to an idea that we see popping up all over the state. When that happens, we'll refine those dozen, 2 dozen, 3, 4 dozen ideas, and then go back out to at least 6 of these media markets once again, possibly more, maybe all 12 again, and say to the citizens, this is what you and your citizen colleagues told us the first time. We've refined the idea a bit. What do you think of it now? And we'll get some more reaction. Then, with that reaction, we'll then also go to policy analysts, experts, private sector, academics, government officials, and ask them, what do you think of this idea? Will it work? Will it not work? And when we have that refined, then we'll go to our elected leaders and say, we've got some ideas for you that we think are worth looking at. We've done a fair amount of analysis. And we have lots of people that have said, I like this idea, literally tens of thousands. Now, it's important that the public is involved in this process, so we have this tens of thousands for this reason, Cheryl. A few years ago, we had this thing called the Kettle Commission in our state. Very, very good ideas in that Kettle Commission report. It really, in some respects, was a blueprint for a more successful Wisconsin of the future. Now, the number of ideas that have been enacted from the Kettle Commission report, you could fit into a thimble. Not many. Why? There's no reason to do so. If you don't, who's going to say you didn't do it? And there's not much of it's not an issue. But if we have tens of thousands of people that look at our problems and say, yeah, you know, some of these problems are going to take a little longer than 2 and 4 years. Really what we're doing is creating a safe harbor for our policy leaders to say, you know, I don't have to get this done in 2 and 4 years because the citizens understand that it's going to take a little more time to get out of our current problem and plan for the future, and it may take 5 or 10 or 15 years. So I'm making a difficult decision today, and I won't have anything to show for it in 2 and 4 years, but the citizenry is going to say, I think that person has some vision, and I'm willing to follow that person and lead us to a better state. That is what we'll have. And we'll create that environment so our policymakers have more comfort and are free to explore visioning in 10, 20, 50-year increments.
Are you hoping that will have some kind of trickle-down effect or some kind of trickle-down information that comes to the local leaders?
What I'm hoping that this does is that we actually pass legislation to modify our tax structure. This particular Wisconsin Way effort is about our tax structure, the inconsistency of our tax structure and our economy. We have a 1957 tax structure being applied to a new millennium economy, and it's not working. Let me explain the tax issue this way.
Sure.
For a long time, our property tax system actually was progressive. And for purposes of our conversation, let's say progressive means the more you have, the more you pay. Regressive would mean it's a lower income person is paying a larger percentage of their dollars to taxes. But let's say the more you have, the more you pay. Baby boomers, us, we were the most voracious consumers the planet has ever seen. We bought more, we consumed more, we threw away more, and we're still doing it. And we measured our wealth by how much property we accumulated. That was one of the material goods that we went out and accumulated, and we accumulated a lot of it. Now, we paid a lot of property taxes in a relatively progressive system because we had this underlying revenue stream called income, which allowed us to pay these property taxes. Now, what's happening starting 2 weeks ago, the very first baby boomers started to receive Social Security. So the underlying revenue stream called income is going away, yet we're still measuring a person's wealth by how much property they have. So the very demographic of the population that we're relying on for revenues to fund government services and our infrastructure is the very demographic that is least able to pay for it because they don't have the income to support it anymore. So our measurement of a person's wealth based on how much property they have is flawed. And as we move through, as the demographic bubble moves forward, that cannot be sustained. Now, before people get too excited about trying to label this effort, let me say this. The current situation we're in, we've attempted to control our property tax situation by sort of closing our eyes and putting caps and limits and restraints and freezes on it, saying we're not going to address the real problem. We're just going to put a lid on this boiling kettle and maybe it'll go away. There is no example in the history of civilized societies where permanent caps, freezes, restraints, restrictions can be sustained. What actually can work, that will not work long term. It's going to make us feel good for a year or two or three, but eventually there's big trouble. What actually can work is capitalism. The private sector does two things exceedingly well. It employs people and creates wealth. As government, we have a responsibility to create an environment where the private sector can do just that. Employ people, create wealth. And with that increased wealth, we apply a modified, an improved tax structure to it. We raise revenues, actually reduce our tax ranking nationally if people are concerned about that particular number. We reduce that because we disperse the burden while people are making more money, and then we have the dollars to invest in our communities, to invest in our transportation infrastructure, our water infrastructure, our sewer systems. That makes our communities more attractive to the wealth makers of tomorrow. And it's critically important now because as a state, 61% of our population is in the workforce. In the next 20 years, that's going to drop to 57%. We're not unlike any other state. So the raw resource of tomorrow is not paper, it's not steel. The raw resource for private sector profit tomorrow is brain power. We seem unwilling to invest in that because we can't touch it and it goes away. But we're willing to do it in a road, but we have to modify our thinking. That we need to harness that resource, get as much of it as we possibly can, keep it here so that the private sector can do what the private sector does best. Mine that raw resource of brain power, employ people, create wealth, apply a modified tax structure to that increased wealth, and then have the dollars to invest in our communities, and Wisconsin is then poised for success.
Was the levy freeze, Mark, kind of the impetus for this concept?
No, not really. We've had a tax rate limit, for example, since 1992. Levy freeze happened several years ago. It wasn't the impetus for it. I would say part of the impetus for us getting together was the flawed thinking behind TABOR, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. And people hear Taxpayer Bill of Rights and, my gosh, it must be good because Bill of Rights, well, we always support that, and I'm a taxpayer, and that was a very nice name for something which would have put our state in dire straits very quickly. So the legislature was very wise. They dispensed with that. They set it aside and said that's not going to work. And now we're working on things that actually can work, and that's what this Wisconsin Way is about.
I want to dig into your presentation a little
Yeah.
bit because the numbers, I'm having a sort of a brain freeze on a really good presentation. Let's pretend, just the four of us, that we're going to get rid of property tax.
Sure.
What would we replace it with? Just some ideas.
If we were going to get rid of the property tax.
Tonight we're going to eliminate property tax. You know, I've been hearing about changing property tax, making it better, more progressive. But let's talk about, you know, a progressive by the name of Henry George back in the late 19th century wanted to go with a single tax. Are you familiar with the single tax law?
Yeah,
Okay.
single tax, flat tax, sure.
Yeah. and became sort of popular because it eliminated land was taxed at the same value, irregardless of whether you had a house on your property or Mark had an apartment or Cheryl had a little shack. The land was all taxed the same. Got rid of this inequity. So just for plain, if we were going to replace the property tax, what would you guys come up with?
Well, I think when we have these meetings, people will have a variety of ideas.
Yeah.
But let me
But just what do you
give you the
think?
narrow perspective of a county executive. There still has to be the revenue to support the
I
county.
understand that.
So your choices are perhaps the other two taxes that exist already,
Okay.
sales and income tax. And remember, the secret in part is to generate higher income so that those taxes will give a higher return. The other possibilities are things that we don't have in this country at this time, but something like a value-added tax.
Okay. Like they have in Europe.
But what I know can't keep happening is with regard to local government, and that's the ones that, it's the schools, the cities, the counties, the towns, those are the ones that collect property tax now, that when the state continues to push responsibilities down onto those levels of government and doesn't increase the revenues that flow to those governments from the income tax and from the sales tax. And I'll give you an example. With the city of Oshkosh, their shared revenue has shrunk some years and has remained flat others. So that every year the portion of the city's support that are coming from its other revenues, primarily property tax, are bearing a larger share of the burden. With the county, we have the same situation. Our revenue sharing was froze this year. The court system, which the state is supposed to be paying for, they now pay less than 19% of the total. That other 81% didn't go away when they didn't fund it. It was shifted onto the property taxpayer.
No, I'm just trying to get us to think out of the box. You're making a good argument that we have to keep the property tax, and it's not fair.
Well, we
But-
have to have a revenue stream.
But
Now,
what could we come up with other than property tax?
Well, it would have to be some other form of revenue. I think one that's tied more closely to people's ability to pay would probably be more acceptable to the public. But I don't want to say it's one particular answer, because the whole point of this is to gather the data. But the ones that come to my mind are sales and income tax.
But what do you think?
Well, here's some of the ideas that some people have raised thus far in the sessions.
Anyone want to get rid of the property tax?
Well, I think probably everyone would like to get
Okay.
rid of the property tax.
Okay, well, let's talk about it then. How do we
now,
get rid of it, and what do we replace it with?
If here's some ideas that some of the people have had. Some people have indicated, well, let's change the basket of goods and services on which we apply the sales tax.
Okay.
Let's modify that.
Get more money.
Well, if you're going to get rid of the property
Right,
tax,
right.
you're going to have to
Right.
get
I understand.
additional from somewhere else. So it would be expanding the basket. You could apply a lower rate to that larger basket of goods and services and not raise any more money, and still modify that sales tax, put us in a good position for the future. Or you could modify that basket, keep the same 5% state rate, and then raise the additional dollars to offset the property. Okay. The other major source, and some people have talked about this in the sessions, is income. Okay. But property tax is the most despised tax, right, followed by income tax. Sales tax is actually not nearly as despised. There's an article in the USA Today just a few days ago where several states in the nation are looking at sales tax. In fact, our nation was looking at a sales tax, but still is in some congressional quarters. Those are the two major areas. Now, the practical reality, Dan, is that we're not going to get rid of the property tax. There will still be some element of the property tax. Here another idea that came up. Let's attach an income tax to those individuals that graduate from our K-12, or let's call it a K-20 system of education here, but graduated so that you're somewhat paying for your education. I mean, if you have a revenue stream you can rely upon because people are going to pay a small portion of their income related to their education they received in Wisconsin, then you have a revenue stream to bond against that you're able to invest in our communities and create capacity to educate more people. So there is that. Okay. But I don't want to get too bogged down in, this is not an exercise to reduce one tax and raise another. That's not, if we're interested in that, right, there's lots of studies that have already done that. Yeah. This is about, as the executive indicated, we need a complete modification and a recognition of where we're going as a state. And that our level of incomes is really a critical part of that. Sure. Let me give you another statistic, Dan. Of the top 10 jobs slated for increased growth in our state, in fact, the 10 fastest growing jobs, occupations in our state between now and 2014, 8 of the top 10 require no more than a high school education. Now, there is a direct correlation between the education level of the populace and our per capita personal income. We're continuing to move as a state toward an economy of personal health care and retail. That's not going to put us in a position to succeed as a state in coming years. We need to have more people with more education, and we need to have those people staying in our state and create this raw resource of brain power, which will be the attractive raw product for the private sector, private business to utilize in the future. If we raise our incomes, our tax ranking drops. We actually do raise more dollars to fix our water and sewer systems and transportation structures and so on, and solve part of our problem. Now, this reliance on the property tax, though, it's a serious matter. That will have to change. Mm-hmm. Some people want to simply arrest it and let's just not raise it. No, it's going to have to change substantially. It cannot be sustained in the coming years, not with this onset of the silver tsunami.
What's the corporate tax rate in this state, and what was it 20 years ago?
The tax rate, I'd have to check, Dan.
Yeah.
But some people have indicated, corporations are paying a lot less in taxes now than they did previously, and the burden is shifted to homeowners. Well, there are many, many, many more homeowners than there are businesses. Homeowners have grown exponentially, and business has not. Now, in the business corporate tax generates, let's say, roughly speaking, somewhat north of $1 billion. All right.
I think it's about 5.5% of the state's total receipts from income tax, our corporate income tax.
You would have to, if you wanted to make a major shift in taxes and increase corporate income tax, you'd have to increase it substantially, and which really would have a negative impact on the economy. I think we might also we might want to have a discussion in the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. Some people have indicated, okay, there's $1 billion. Now, when you look at who pays the $1 billion, there are some large corporations that don't pay very much, and many medium and small corporations that pay quite a lot. I would suggest that we have a discussion about either fixing the corporate income tax to make it more equitable, or, I'm not so sure that I buy into this argument, but I think we should have it. Maybe we ought to talk about getting rid of the corporate income tax. If that really will create an incentive for business to come to our communities, the kinds of businesses that will employ smart, young, educated people to raise their per capita personal income, I think that's a very legitimate conversation to have. Mm-hmm. I think we ought to have it.
I heard that 1% of the people in the United States last year made 27% of the wealth.
That's correct.
Yeah. So this trickle-down supply side thing doesn't do anything for me. Mm-hmm. I think they ought to pay more. And I think the disparity between the very wealthy and a less middle class and more poor people has been around since Ronald Reagan. And so I hope you people will, I think corporate need to pay more.
Well, we'll hear that in Oshkosh,
yeah.
But come to the forum and tell us that, Dan.
Yeah.
Well, of course, you just told us on TV, so
we'll
get it.
But I think you have to have an environment that's attractive to business, because you want to bring as much business as you can in. But if you have a system where so many corporations are not paying tax on the income they earn in Wisconsin because they're using methods to transfer it to jurisdictions that don't have tax. For instance, they have a two-man office in Nevada that writes all the insurance for their operations in Wisconsin, and they set the rates high enough to shift all the profit from Wisconsin to Nevada where there's no corporate tax. That's sort of a legal tax avoidance. Mm-hmm. If you could bring the recognition of that income back to where it's earned, you could lower the rate to make the state more attractive for those people that are reporting their income in Wisconsin and still have a higher return just by ending these methods that attribute income earned here to another state. I'll give you some example. There's retail stores who have to rent their own name from post office boxes in Nevada that shifts all their income to Nevada. Newspapers that rent their mastheads from Nevada addresses. Divisions whose sole purpose it is to shift the income out of the state. These types of schemes are used by so many of the large corporations of Wisconsin that very few large corporations here pay much money.
Well, that's the reason we ought to look at it, and if it needs fixing, we ought to fix it.
Sure.
But at the same time, our corporate citizenry in our state has a vested interest, a great desire to have healthy, vibrant, economically viable communities. So we need those corporate citizens. We need them to be good corporate citizens, and we need them to pay a portion, share a portion of the tax burden. Not too great, not too small, but a portion of it. Again, though, if we increased our per capita personal income, and that will happen with more businesses coming to our state, the kinds of businesses that will employ smart, educated young people, then the portion that corporate America will pay, corporate Wisconsin will pay, will increase because they'll be making more, they will pay more, and if we modify the structure, it can work quite well.
And that's one of these things that at this meeting, one person will come in, and they might have an idea where you can create an environment so attractive to the corporations by reducing the tax that you increase the number of employed people and push the income up. I mean, there's going to be competing ideas. But I think by having a discussion, sometimes an open-minded person can change their perspective. They can be open to new ideas. And it may lead us to go in a different direction, to make some change that will work, rather than just staying with a system that we can see the dead end coming.
What other, I mean, have you heard anything really unique in the first few meetings that you guys have held?
Oh, Cheryl, I think there's been, I think there's been lots of unique ideas. None come to mind right now, but there have been some. The sessions have been recorded, so if anyone wishes to see them, we can make that available to them. Eventually, they'll be up on the website. In fact, they might be on the website now, wisconsinway.org. Spell the whole word, wisconsinway.org.
And we're putting it up throughout the show.
And
so.
People can go there and see it, and I think we can probably see the sessions right now. Also, if people can't attend the event, but they have an idea, you can go to wisconsinway.org, and there's a portion of the website where you can type in your ideas, send your ideas, your proposals, and they don't have to be a multi-page, well-thought-out, I've got all the answers proposal. It can be an idea, and that's part of our job in the public arena of policy, to hash that out and see what we can do to make it work.
Okay.
I know that your show will air one time before the November 6th
Yes.
Oshkosh meeting of Wisconsin Way. But I'm not sure we mentioned the time is between 7 and 9 p.m. and the location is at the Park Plaza Conference Center. And I'm not exactly sure what room it'll be, whether it'll actually end up in the hotel or the conference center. But that's right here on Main Street. And people that hear this show beforehand, perhaps they should go on the website and indicate that they're coming. But I would welcome them to come.
Sure.
And I think it'll be an interesting exchange of ideas. I don't think they're gonna leave with the sense that there's a solution found, but I think they'll leave with a sense of what the mission is.
Yeah, people don't have to have ideas to if they want to come and listen. They might hear something that just causes them to think about it and follow up later with something. If you have something to say, this forum is available to you. We're gonna the setup will be this. We'll at 7 o'clock. If you're going to come to the event, come right at 7, because at about 7:05 we're going to show a video, about a 10-12 minute video, emceed by former Congressman Scott Klug, which describes the current trends in our state. Then we're going to spend about 45 minutes or so talking about the problems, and do they resonate with the individuals in the audience, their businesses, their families, their community. And then following that, we'll talk about, well, what ideas might you have? And people will come to the microphone and say, I've got this idea and I've got that idea. And many people will listen and think about those ideas and contact us afterwards with, I heard this at the Wisconsin Way event in Oshkosh, here are my thoughts on it. I think that won't work, or I think this might work too, and we're getting those ideas. So that's how it'll go.
How many people are usually in attendance at these?
Oh, we've had great hundreds. In La Crosse, we had, which was the first one, we had well over 350 people, and we had room for everyone. There'll be seating for everyone. Bring your kids, bring your class. If you're university students, bring your friends. Before you go out to downtown Oshkosh, come and stop by the event, share your thoughts. Anyone and everyone is welcome. Business owners, You'll see realtors, teachers, county folks there, transportation folks there. You'll see those for sure. But we certainly want anyone who has an interest or an idea, stop by. Let us know what you think.
I'd like to see you guys try and get some of our shared revenue back. That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, that's an
Is that
interesting-
one of the goals?
It's not a stated goal of this effort. No, I mean shared revenue is an interesting. I mean, shared revenue is an interesting issue to bring up, given we just passed a budget, and this budget is perhaps the best thing you can say about this budget is that it's done finally. This budget is not full of vision. This budget is going to get us through for another 2 years. And we will continue to have hand-wringing, and we'll continue to have a structural deficit, and we will continue to have fiscal pressures in our state. We will continue to have significant bonding. We'll continue to have infrastructure that needs improvement. We'll continue all of that. This budget's not going to address that. What we need is a budget that does have vision for 10, 20, 50 years into the future, a different Wisconsin, a Wisconsin that we want to leave for our children and grandchildren. And because someone did not do this before us, because someone 20 years ago did not say, I want a different Wisconsin in 2007, that does not give us, in the public arena, does not give us license to not do it today. We have a responsibility to do that. And that's what we're doing with this Wisconsin way. Some people don't like it. I'm sorry about that. But we're going to move forward because this discussion needs to happen.
You know, there are societies that have made dramatic changes in the way they operated with some success. And I'm not sure that what works in one place would work in another. But in Ireland, for instance, because of the shortage of employment over years, they discouraged women from working outside the home. And their economy was the slowest economy in Europe. Then suddenly they got this idea that the secret was education. And they devoted a lot of resources to getting more people more educated. And I know there was a European Union grant involved, but now they're one of the fastest growing societies, economies in the European Union. And it's because they dramatically changed the way they looked at the world and the way they operated. And maybe there's some model for Wisconsin that would leave us all better off just by taking a fresh look from the outside at how we could change things.
You know what really happened in Ireland? St. Patrick came to their assembly and told them to shape up.
Yeah.
And we need a St. Patrick in Madison because we have a legislature that has no vision whatsoever. That's
Dan,
probably your biggest problem.
Dan, what the executive just mentioned with this Irish education model, and there was some resistance to it, but changing our perspective on the public policy issues of the day is important. We continue to view education as an expenditure. How much are we spending? How much are we expending on K-12 and higher education? That's the wrong perspective. How much are we investing in education? Because we're not investing in the education, in the structures, we're investing in the minds that it is shaping. And in those minds is the next Google creator, all right? And we want them here in our state. The Irish education model did this. And there are those who would say, well, with all that money spent, where was the benefit? Well, the Irish corporate income tax, we talked previously, corporate income tax was exceedingly high. I mean, not too many years ago in the high 30%. It is now at 19% and going down. That's the value of an increased, more vibrant economy, higher per capita personal income, dispersion of the tax burden, and vibrancy in the communities. That can happen. When we talk about the kinds of things that could happen in this Wisconsin way, and people say, well, how could that ever happen? Or could that really work? Well, yes, it can work because it is working. It's working in Ireland, and there are other states where there are successful types of things going on that we could learn from.
I'm still trying to get a handle on how this is going to affect my local school taxes, my county taxes, my city taxes. How is that going to work? I'm having a tough time getting my arms around this.
Well, we'll come up eventually when we go through the first set of sessions, public policy work and thinking, second set of sessions, experts and policy analysts looking at it, creating ideas, eventually to our policymakers, our leaders in the Assembly and the Senate and the governor, and we pass legislation that modifies our tax structure. What will happen? Well, let's say one of the modifications is it changes tax A, B, and C from the property tax to something else. How will this affect you? Schools might be funded differently. Counties might be funded differently. There might be a much less reliance on the property tax. In fact, there will be less reliance on the property tax because that tax is not sustainable. So what will happen? Property taxes will be modified in some way. It might be modified based on the demographic that you are. Maybe it's going to be related to your age. Maybe we'll do something with valuations. It'll affect you that way. Okay. So the school boards, the counties, the cities, there may be different revenue streams to fund that. Or maybe we'll decide as a state that there are simply some functions we're not going to perform. The county executive mentioned earlier these mandates. For those listening to this show, we in county government, I'll speak for counties, although my friends in cities and towns and school districts feel the same. We have a responsibility to work with the state. We're all public servants. We're all on the same. We're all doing the same. We're in the same ball game. The public, quite frankly, I don't think they really care much whether the state told the county or told the city or the county. If I'm a citizen and I need a service, I don't care which one of you people is telling who to do it. Just make sure it gets done because I need it. In government, we have a responsibility to work out our differences and get along with one another. Now, yes, we have these mandates and it causes pressure on the property tax. Those are anecdotal and symptomatic symptoms of a much larger problem, a substance problem, a fabric problem, and that's what needs to get repaired.
I'm going to follow up on Cheryl. In the end, are you going to have like a compact or a contract for Wisconsin? It's going to be a document that's going to sort of summarize and prioritize all of these things that you're going to get?
We're not going to have a contract for or on Wisconsin, Dan. We're going to have there will be a body of ideas, and quite possibly well thought out proposals that policymakers, policy leaders, elected officials will then say, I think these can work. How about we modify it this way? What do we think about this? And there'll be studies and academics looking at that and modifying it. And then eventually it will find its way into legislation. And then we will have a another full-fledged policy debate on that legislative modification to our tax structure, our education system, our county service delivery system, or any number of a host of public services.
So your group then will initiate the legislation if there is some through your group or individual groups?
We will
Wisconsin
work with
Way will introduce this as a group?
The Wisconsin Way effort will result in these well thought out proposals that then policymakers will pick up and run with.
Okay. We just passed a new biennial budget, so we would hope to see this influencing the next biennial budget, hopefully? Is that?
I suspect by next summer we'll have some ideas. We'll have a pretty good idea of the kinds of ideas, and we'll probably spend the summer hashing those out and adding some substance to them and evaluating their potential success.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think by the 08, this will probably be a point of debate in the elections of next year, November elections, and I hope it is, Dan, Cheryl. I hope that in the fall of next year, a year from now, I hope people are saying we have a Democrat and Republican and whoever else is running for office, for Senate or Assembly. I hope one of them is saying, well, whatever we do, when I get to Madison, we're going to have to modify our tax structure. It's not working. And I hope the opponent says, I agree with my opponent. That's a given. We have to do it. Now, I don't care which one of them win, because they have to go to Madison and recognize that the property tax is not sustainable and we have to modify the structure. So come to Madison and represent the people who elected you, and let's modify our structure to put us in a position for success.
But there has to be some muscle like these organizations can provide to kind of speak with a consistent voice and get to all the legislators, because otherwise you've got everybody thinking in increments to the next election and pretending that this is a zero-sum game. I mean, how often have you heard people with the city say the problem is they give too much to the schools, or the schools say they give too much to the university, and we just can't keep thinking of this as a zero-sum game where change can only come in tiny increments that are fulfilled by the next election. There needs to be some long-term vision, a plan, and I think you have to have groups from different sides of the aisle with different perspectives come together to kind of agree on something as a good long-range plan and then to promote it. But the initial phase is to find out what the public views as a favorable plan.
Now, with people who come to this, I've been to the Wisconsin Way events thus far. And one thing that I find, and it's incredibly heartening to me, when you go to this event next Tuesday on November 6th at the
Park Plaza.
Park Plaza, one thing I can guarantee you're going to see. You're going to see a room full of people that love this state, that care about this state, that care about it now, and want a better Wisconsin tomorrow, next year, in 10 years, in 20 years, and in 50 years when they're gone. They want a better state. And they're willing, I believe, the citizenry is willing to say, I know we can't get it all right now, and I'm willing to engage in some difficult discussions and have some policymakers make difficult decisions, because I understand that where we're going now is not going to get us to where we need to be. And those difficult decisions are going to take some time, and they might even be painful, but it's going to put us in a better position in the future. You're going to see those kind of people.
Okay.
This town is full of them. I mean, Oshkosh is full of them. Winnebago County is full of them.
Sure.
This whole area is, and it's not unlike the rest of the state. And that's incredibly heartening.
I'm sure someone out there is wondering, so I'm going to ask the question.
Yes.
Is the Wisconsin Way, the organization, is it a political action committee?
No, it is absolutely not. It is. It's not a legal entity. The Wisconsin Way is an effort. It is an energy mass of these 5 groups: Wood Communications Group, the teachers, the realtors, the transportation builders, and the counties. It is all of us together, and the Wisconsin Way is the effort.
Okay.
Are you at this point the leader of the Wisconsin Way?
There are 5 leaders, and it's those 5 groups,
So
and
you
we all speak.
You're the Wisconsin County, so you're one of the 5.
We're one of the 5.
One
yes.
of the 5.
Yep.
Kind of a bishop.
Well, I've never been called a bishop, Dan.
Until now, right?
Until now, right here on Oshkosh Television.
Okay, we've talked about getting individual citizens involved, coming to the meetings,
Yes.
giving their ideas, and networking with each other that way. Are you at all interested or open to the idea of more bodies of groups like these joining your mass, your force? if
Oh,
you will?
absolutely. Cheryl, that's a good question. These are the 5 groups that have put dollars on the table to make this work. But there are dozens and dozens of other groups that have said, I'm a supporter. I'm with you on this. Let's have the conversation. Then there are many, many, many other groups, tens of thousands of people that we've spoken with thus far that are informed and have said, I like what you're doing. You should have the conversation. And the list of people supporting this is growing all the time. And it's all over the political spectrum. I mean, some of these groups are political in nature. Not the Counties Association. We're in the middle. We're nonpartisan. County officials are nonpartisan, so we're on either side of the aisle. But some of these folks, they gravitate toward one side or the other. This group is, the Wisconsin Way effort is full of groups from all quarters.
Well, one that just comes to mind, because it's huge in its lobbying efforts, is the Tavern League.
Sure.
Maybe you guys should approach them if they don't approach you.
And that's a good point, Cheryl. Groups are approaching us all the time, and to the extent that we can, if some group listens to this show and says, I'd like to have some of those people come explain this thing to some of my people, give us a call, and we'll see if we can fit it in and get someone out to you. If someone hears this and says, I don't know what those folks are going to come up with, but I like the conversation, I'd like to support this in some way, give us a call. We'll find an opportunity for you to say something good or support it in some way.
I think Chancellor Richard Wells of UWO, sort of a visionary, has all sorts of ideas about 21st century education. I think he would be a...
Chancellor Wells, that is the right term for Chancellor Wells. He is a visionary.
Absolutely.
And one of the diamonds of our state.
Yep.
So people like Chancellor Wells may very well, he has hundreds of ideas to better our state.
Yes.
And hopefully we'll hear some of those ideas on November 6th.
I just had a quick follow-up question, Mark, on, you said that these were the 5 groups, yours included, that have put up some of the money
Yes.
For this. Explain real quickly, how much money are we talking about, and what does that go for? Just to, rent the rooms and put on these events? Is that the money that we're talking about?
To rent the rooms, to put on the events, to hire Wood Communications, to do the organizing, to create the materials and so on. It's a substantial amount of money. It's in the hundreds of thousands with all of us together.
Okay, all right. We've only got a couple minutes left, but Mark, you just finished budget hearings today, as a matter
Yes.
of fact, November 1st. Any surprises there that we citizens can expect?
Well, they are going to see a small increase in their property tax bills. I'm thinking the average taxpayer will probably see an increase between 2 and 2.5%, but it's going to vary a lot from individual to individual. The budget, once again, reduced personnel at the county. I think initially it reduced 29 positions, but I think 3 new positions were added on the board floor. So I think it's going to be reducing 26 positions. I'm running out of places to reduce staff. I now have less people working for me than any of the 2 prior county executives had at any time.
We recently read that the state or the jail is going to be losing some prisoners from Dane County. Is that in the long run going to affect our operating money that we have for the jail?
In the long run, yes. Actually, right now there's some good news, and that's that it seems very likely that state prisoners will displace the Dane County prisoners, which of course were brought in to displace the loss of state prisoners. I think there'll always be people short of jail beds,
Okay.
so that they'll want to lease the beds. So I don't anticipate that the loss of revenue will be significant. There may be some transitional costs where one group's moving out before another group moves in, but I think most of the revenue we've been getting from leasing beds will be there. But in the long run, our local jail population continues to grow. And as that population grows, it reduces the number of beds that are available to lease. So the lease income will go away eventually unless we build a facility for more beds. And basically when we make a change to the jail, we look out 10 years and say, what do we need? That's what we build. And of course, if you build to meet your needs of a growing jail population over 10 years, then you obviously have empty beds in the early years, and you want to keep those full to bring in a stream of income rather than just having an empty bed and no income. So it's all going to work out, but it's just one of those challenges we have. Personally, I think we need to focus much more on alternatives to our incarceration, because it doesn't make sense to spend such enormous amounts of money locking people up when that doesn't seem to change the behavior. We need to find ways that end the behaviors that are causing them to end up in jail.
So even though we're kind of playing ring around the rosy with the inmates, we're still probably going to be facing a jail shortage. Not shortage in numbers of people coming in, but we're going to have a space problem. in a few
Yes, I mean,
years.
we're still anticipating running out of space within
Okay.
the next 5 years. But in the meantime, any space we do have, we want to get revenue off of,
Sure.
because it's part of the mix of holding down the costs.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, thanks to both of you for being here tonight. We really
Dan,
appreciate it.
thank you very much.
Again, I just want to reiterate the times for folks. This show is going to air on Monday, November 5th, and so as you watch this program on that night, the meeting for Wisconsin Way is Tuesday, November 6th from 7 to 9 p.m. At the Park Plaza Conference Center and Hotel at 1 North Main Street. And you can also go to their website, wisconsinway.org, and let them know that you're going to be at that meeting, or if you can't make it, just submit an idea. So anyway, thanks again very much.
Thank you
We
both for
appreciate
coming.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For the show.
Thanks for the effort and good luck.
Tremendous show. Thank you very much.
All right, and that's going to do it. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.